The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. 47 different species sat in the Great Chamber, making laws and deciding the fate of entire worlds. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched stars die and new ones being born. They believed they knew everything about the galaxy and all the creatures living in it. When their sensors picked up strange radio signals coming from a small yellow star at the edge of their territory, they paid little attention. The signals were weak and primitive. The species sending them had not even left their own planet yet. They were nothing. They were insects. The Velthri were a reptilian species known throughout the galaxy for their love of war and conquest. Their scales were thick and green, their eyes cold and calculating. High Commander Kethrel had fought in dozens of campaigns and conquered 11 worlds. When he looked at the sensor data from the small blue planet called Earth, he saw only opportunity. He stood before the council and made his proposal. The primitives on the third planet from that yellow star possessed valuable resources. Their world was rich in minerals that the Velthri needed. The solution was simple. Send a fleet. Eliminate the natives. Take what was useful. It would be quick and easy, the council voted. Most species did not care about some primitive world they had never heard of. The Luminari beings made of living light objected on moral grounds, but their voice was ignored. The vote passed with minimal opposition. The Velthri were given permission to do as they wished. On Earth, humans went about their daily lives with no idea that their fate had been decided by creatures they did not know existed. They worried about their jobs, their families, their small problems. They argued about politics and sports. They made plans for the future. They had dreams. General Samuel Hart was 62 years old. He had served his country for 40 years, fighting in 3 different wars. Now he held a position that everyone considered ceremonial. He was the commander of the United Earth Defense Initiative, an organization created to watch for asteroid threats. Nothing ever happened. It was a retirement job, a way for the government to honor his service without giving him any real responsibility. On that spring morning, Samuel sat at his kitchen table eating breakfast with his daughter. Marie was 35 years old, a doctor who had come to visit for the weekend. They talked about her children, about the weather, about nothing important. The sun was shining through the window. It was a perfect day. Then the sky turned white. The Velthri Strike Fleet emerged from hyperspace above Earth without warning. 47 warships, each one capable of destroying entire continents. High Commander Kethrel gave no speech, issued no demands. He simply ordered the bombardment to begin. The first plasma strike hit the eastern coast of North America. 3 major cities vanished in less than 90 seconds. Millions of people were there one moment and gone the next. The shockwave spread outward, shattering windows hundreds of miles away. Samuel felt his house shake. He heard his daughter scream. Through the broken window, he saw a light brighter than the sun, and he understood immediately that everything had changed. He grabbed Marie's hands and looked into her eyes. "Get to the shelter," he said. His voice was calm, though his heart was pounding. "Take the car and drive west. Do not stop for anything. Dad, what is happening?" "I do not know. But I need to find out. Go now." He kissed her forehead the way he had done when she was a little girl. Then he got into his old truck and drove toward the Pentagon. The roads were chaos. People were running, screaming, crashing into each other. The sky was filled with smoke and strange lights. Emergency broadcasts played on every radio station, the voices of the announcers shaking with fear. By the time Samuel reached what remained of the Pentagon, he had heard the death toll estimates. 400 million people were already dead. The number was climbing every minute. The Velthri had expected the bombardment to be over in 3 hours. They had done this before, 2 other primitive worlds. The pattern was always the same. The natives would panic, scatter, hide. They would die quickly and quietly. Then the Velthri would land and take what they wanted, but humans were different. Samuel Hart stood in the emergency command center, surrounded by military officers from every nation on Earth. Their old conflicts meant nothing now. Russian generals stood beside American admirals. Chinese commanders worked with European strategists. They were no longer enemies. They were all just humans, fighting for survival. A young officer named Kevin Price approached Samuel with a tablet in his shaking hands. Kevin was only 24 years old, barely old enough to shave. He had been trained for conventional warfare, not an alien invasion. But he had done the math, and the math was terrifying. Sir Kevin said, "I have calculated our options. Even if we launch every nuclear weapon on Earth, we cannot destroy their fleet before they finish the bombardment. We do not have enough firepower." Samuel studied the numbers for a long moment. The alien ships were massive, protected by technology humanity could barely understand. Their weapons could vaporize cities from orbit. Earth's missiles were primitive by comparison, designed to fight other humans, not beings from another star. The room was silent. Everyone was waiting for Samuel to speak. He was the highest-ranking officer who had survived the initial attack. The responsibility was his now. "Who said anything about destroying them?" Samuel asked. Kevin looked confused. "Sir, you said we cannot destroy their fleet? Fine. Then we will not try to destroy their fleet. We will make them bleed. We will make this invasion cost them so much that they will never want to come back. We will show them that Earth is not worth the price." Samuel turned to face the assembled officers. These were men and women who had dedicated their lives to defending their countries. Now, they would defend their entire species. "Launch everything," Samuel ordered. "Every nuclear weapon, every missile, every rocket we have. But do not aim for their ships. Aim for their sensors, their communications, their weak points. Blind them first. Then we will hit them with everything else." The officers hesitated for only a moment. Then they began to move. In missile silos across the world, launch sequences began. For the first time in human history, every nuclear power fired their weapons at the same target. Not at each other, but at the sky. At the enemy. At the monsters who had come to kill them all. High Commander Kethril watched from his flagship as thousands of primitive missiles rose from the burning planet below. He felt amusement at first. These weapons were pathetic, the desperate acts of a dying species. He did not understand what was about to happen. The first wave of missiles detonated at different altitudes, creating massive electromagnetic pulses that swept through his fleet. Sensor arrays went dark. Communication systems failed. Ships that had been perfectly coordinated moments ago were suddenly blind and alone. Then the second wave arrived. 17 Velthari warships died in the first exchange. Kethril watched in disbelief as his fleet burned. He had conquered 11 worlds. He had never lost a single ship. Now his mighty fleet was being torn apart by creatures who had not even known aliens existed until this morning. For the first time in his long life, High Commander Kethril felt fear. The battle above Earth continued for 18 hours. It was the longest 18 hours in human history. On the ground, people huddled in shelters and basements, listening to the explosions overhead and praying for survival. In space, humanity fought with everything it had. General Samuel Hart had not slept since the attack began. He stood in the command center beneath Cheyenne Mountain, watching the screens that showed the battle unfolding above. Every few minutes, another icon would disappear from the display. Sometimes it was an alien ship, destroyed by human weapons. More often, it was a human vessel, sacrificed to take down the enemy. The plan was simple because there was no time for complicated plans. Every functional spacecraft on Earth was being converted into a weapon. Mining vessels designed to harvest asteroids were loaded with explosives. Research stations were stripped of their scientific equipment and filled with nuclear warheads. Even the International Space Station, humanity's greatest achievement in space exploration, was turned into a missile aimed at the largest enemy ship. Volunteers came forward by the thousands. Pilots who knew they would not survive. Engineers who stayed behind to make final adjustments to the weapons. Ordinary people who had never been to space but were willing to die there if it meant saving their families. A woman named Catherine Year sat in the cockpit of a converted cargo hauler. She was 41 years old, a former commercial pilot who had been delivering supplies to the moon colony when the attack began. She had 2 children back on Earth, a boy named Lucas and a girl named Emma. They were with their father in a shelter somewhere in Texas. She hoped they were safe. She prayed she would see them again, even though she knew she would not. Her target was a Velthary dreadnought, one of the largest ships in the enemy fleet. It had already destroyed 4 human vessels that tried to approach it. Its point defense weapons were deadly, designed to intercept incoming missiles and plasma torpedoes. But Catherine's ship was not a missile. It was a piece of debris, drifting slowly toward the massive alien vessel. She had turned off all her systems, except life support. No engines, no weapons, no communications. To the alien sensors, she was just another piece of wreckage floating through the battlefield. She had been drifting for 6 hours, skidding closer with each passing minute. When she was finally close enough, she activated her engines at full power. The cargo hauler shot forward like a bullet, aimed directly at the dreadnought's engine section. The alien point defense systems detected her too late. They fired, hitting her ship with plasma beams that burned through the hull. But she was already too close to stop in her final moment. Catherine opened a communication channel and spoke her children's names: Lucas, Emma. Then her ship struck the alien vessel at full speed, and both were consumed in a ball of fire that could be seen from Earth. The dreadnought broke apart. Its reactor went critical and exploded, destroying 2 smaller ships that were nearby. 3 enemy vessels killed by 1 human pilot who refused to give up. Stories like this repeated across the battlefield. A retired astronaut named George Palmer flew his antique space shuttle directly into an alien weapons array. A team of engineers on a mining station stayed behind to manually detonate their nuclear warheads when the remote systems failed. A young pilot named Diana Costa rammed her damaged fighter into an alien ship's communications tower, cutting off its ability to coordinate with the rest of the fleet. Commander Kethrel watched his fleet dying and could not understand what he was seeing. The Velthary had conquered dozens of worlds. They had fought species with far superior technology, but they had never encountered anything like this. These humans did not fight like rational beings. They did not calculate acceptable losses. They did not retreat when the situation became hopeless. They just kept coming. The Velthary point defense systems were the most advanced in the galaxy. They could track and destroy thousands of incoming projectiles per second. They were designed to intercept plasma torpedoes traveling at significant fractions of light speed. They were perfect weapons, but they had never been designed to stop a cargo ship filled with nuclear weapons. Piloted by a mother who was thinking about her children, they had never been designed to stop a mining vessel crewed by engineers who had rigged their own reactor to explode. They had never been designed to stop humans. After 18 hours of continuous battle, High Commander Kethrel made the decision that would haunt his species for generations. He ordered a retreat. The surviving Velthary ships activated their hyperspace drives and fled. They left behind the wreckage of 31 warships, more than 2/3 of their invasion force. They left behind the bodies of thousands of Velthary warriors. They left behind their pride and their reputation as the galaxy's greatest conquerors. On Earth, the survivors emerged from their shelters to find a world transformed. 60% of the human population was dead. Major cities on every continent had been reduced to craters. The atmosphere was thick with smoke and ash. Radiation levels were dangerous across vast regions. The global infrastructure had been shattered, but Earth remained. General Samuel Hart walked through the ruins of what had been Washington. DC, the city where he had spent most of his career, was now a graveyard of broken buildings and scattered debris. He could see the Capitol building in the distance, half collapsed, but still standing. The American flag that had flown over it was gone, burned away in the attack. Kevin Price walked beside him. The young officer who had calculated their impossible odds. Kevin had not slept either. His uniform was torn and dirty. His face was covered in ash. But he was alive. "We won," Kevin said, his voice filled with disbelief. "We actually won." Samuel shook his head. "We survived. That is not the same as winning. Winning means they never come back. Winning means our children do not have to fight this battle again." He stopped and looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the clouds and the smoke, the stars were shining. stars that humanity had always dreamed of visiting, stars that now held enemies who wanted them dead. "We need to rebuild," Samuel said. "Not just our cities, everything. Our technology, our military, our entire civilization. We need to become stronger than they can imagine. We need to make sure that the next time someone attacks Earth, they will regret it even more than the Velthri do now." Kevin nodded slowly. "How long do you think we have?" "I do not know. Maybe decades, maybe centuries. It does not matter. We will be ready whenever they come back." Samuel turned away from the ruins and began walking toward the emergency command center that had been established in a surviving bunker. There was work to do. Plans to make, a species to save. Behind him, the sun was setting over the destroyed city. It painted the sky in shades of red and orange, beautiful despite the horror that had caused it. In shelters across the planet, survivors were beginning to emerge to search for loved ones. To start the long process of rebuilding, humanity had been pushed to the edge of extinction. They had lost billions of lives, countless cities, almost everything they had built, over thousands of years of civilization. But they had not lost hope. They had not lost their will to survive, and they had not lost their anger in the Galactic Council chamber. Far across the galaxy, representatives of 47 species received the news of the Velthier defeat. They could not believe it. A pre-contact species barely capable of leaving their own planet had driven back one of the most powerful military forces in known space. The council debated for days. Some wanted to send a larger fleet to finish what the Velthri had started. Others argued that any species capable of doing what the humans had done was too dangerous to provoke further. The Luminari reminded everyone that the attack had been unprovoked, that the humans had simply been defending their home in the end. The council chose what they thought was the safe option. They established a quarantine zone around the Sol system. They ordered all species to avoid contact with Earth. They decided to wait and watch. Hoping that the humans would eventually destroy themselves, they had no idea what they had. Awakened, the years after the bombardment were the hardest humanity had ever faced. More than 4 billion people were dead. The survivors faced starvation, disease, and radiation sickness. Governments had collapsed. Cities were abandoned. For a while it seemed like the aliens might get their wish after all, that humans would destroy themselves without any further help. But Samuel Hart refused. To let that happen, he gathered the remaining leaders of Earth in a bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, presidents and prime ministers, generals and scientists, anyone with the authority to make decisions, sat around a long table. They were exhausted. They were grieving. They were afraid. But they were also angry, and Samuel knew how to use that anger. "The creatures who attacked us will return," he said. "Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next year. But they will come back. And when they do, we must be ready. Not just to survive, but to win." A Russian general named Victor raised his hand. "How? We lost everything. Our armies are destroyed. Our factories are rubble. We are barely feeding our people. Then we rebuild," Samuel replied. "Not the way we were before. Better. Stronger. We cannot waste time fighting each other anymore. We cannot afford nationalism or politics or any of the things that divided us before. We are one species now. We have one enemy, and we have one chance to survive." The meeting lasted for 3 days. By the end, they had agreed on a plan. A unified world government would be established with representatives from every surviving nation. All resources would be shared. All technology would be combined. Every person on Earth would work toward a single goal, ensuring that humanity would never be vulnerable again. Samuel appointed a young engineer named Laura Bennett to lead the technological recovery. Laura was only 30 years old, but she had a brilliant mind and a determination that matched Samuel's own. Her parents had died in the bombardment, along with her husband and her sister. She had nothing left except her work, and she threw herself into it with furious intensity. The wreckage of the Velthri ships became humanity's greatest resource. Pieces of alien technology rained down across the planet, some still burning, some intact enough to study. Laura assembled teams of scientists and engineers from every country. They worked around the clock, taking apart alien devices, trying to understand how they worked, trying to recreate them. Progress was slow at first. The alien technology was centuries ahead of anything humans had developed. Their materials were stronger than anything Earth could produce. Their energy sources were based on physics that human scientists had only theorized about. Many times Laura wanted to give up. Many times she wondered if it was even possible to catch up to beings who had traveled the stars for thousands of years. But humans were fast learners. Within 5 years, they had figured out the basic principles of the alien power systems. Within 10 years, they had built their first working shield generator. Within 20 years, they had launched their first faster-than-light spacecraft. Samuel Hart watched these achievements with pride. But he knew he would not live to see the final victory. He was getting old. His body was failing. The stress of the invasion and the years of rebuilding had taken their toll. But he had one more thing to do before he died. He called a meeting of the knee. World government and made a proposal. Every child on Earth would be taught about the bombardment. They would learn about the billions who died, about the heroes who sacrificed themselves, about the enemy that was waiting in the darkness between the stars. And they would be taught to remember. Anger fades, Samuel said. Grief fades. In a few generations, the invasion will become just a story in history books. Our great-grandchildren might think we exaggerated. They might forget why we built all these weapons, why we spent so many resources on military technology instead of making their lives more comfortable. We cannot let that happen, the government agreed. A new holiday was established, Remembrance Day. When humans across the planet would gather and speak the names of those who had died, schools taught special classes about the invasion. Museums were built to preserve the artifacts and the stories. The message was clear: never forget, never forgive, never be unprepared again. Samuel died at 97 years old, surrounded by his daughter Marie and her children. His last words were recorded and played at every military academy graduation for the next 2 centuries. Remember what they did? Remember what we survived. And remember that out there, they are waiting. The Galactic Council watched Earth from a distance, using long-range sensors to monitor the primitive species they had tried to exterminate. What they saw confused and frightened them. The humans were rebuilding faster than any species in recorded history. Within a single generation, they had established colonies on their moon and the red planet they called Mars. Within 2 generations, they had settlements throughout their solar system. Their ships were getting bigger and faster every year. Their weapons were getting more powerful. High Chancellor Velmora of the Ethon Confederacy called an emergency session of the council. The quarantine is not working, she announced. The humans are advancing too quickly. If we do not act soon, they will become a threat to the entire galaxy. Then we should finish what the Velthri started, said Ambassador Kethvel, grandson of the commander who had led the original invasion. Send a larger fleet. This time, do not stop until every human is dead. The Luminari observer, a being called Ethos, objected, as they always did. The humans have done nothing to provoke this aggression. They were attacked without warning. They defended themselves. Now, they are rebuilding their civilization. Where is the crime in that? The crime is their potential, Kethval replied. Look at what they accomplished in just 2 generations. They went from nuclear missiles to faster-than-light travel in less than 50 years. If we give them another century, they will be more powerful than any of us. They must be destroyed now, while we still can. The debate continued for weeks. Species that had never agreed on anything found themselves taking sides. Some supported the Velthri position, arguing that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to exist. Others supported the Luminari, insisting that attacking a species that had not threatened anyone was morally wrong. A third faction simply wanted to wait longer, hoping the problem would solve itself. In the end, the council did what it always did when faced with a difficult decision. It voted to do nothing. The quarantine would remain in place. No species would contact the humans. Everyone would pretend the problem did not exist and hope it went away. On Earth, the humans continued their work. They did not know about the council debates. They did not know that their existence was being discussed by beings they had never met. They only knew that they had to be ready. Laura Bennett, now an old woman herself, watched the launch of humanity's first true warship from the command center on Mars. It was called the Defender, and it was unlike anything Earth had ever built. Its hull was made of Velthary-derived alloys, stronger than steel and lighter than aluminum. Its weapons could destroy a city from orbit. Its shields could withstand almost any attack. "It is beautiful," she said to her assistant, a young man named Marcus Grant. "It is a weapon," Marcus replied. "Is that really beautiful?" Laura smiled sadly. "I used to think like you. I used to believe that weapons were evil, that violence was always wrong. Then I watched everything I loved burn because we were not strong enough to protect it. Now, I know the truth. Peace is beautiful. But peace without strength is just waiting to be destroyed." The Defender rose into the sky on pillars of fire, the first of many ships that would carry humanity to the stars. Somewhere out there, the beings who had murdered 4 billion people were waiting, and humanity was coming for them, not for revenge, not for conquest. For answers, why had they attacked? Why had they tried to exterminate a species that had never done them any harm? What kind of galaxy had humanity been born into, where such things were allowed to happen? Laura Bennett died 3 years later, her work complete. Her last words were a promise to the children who would inherit the fleet she had helped build, and make sure it never happens again. 200 years had passed since the bombardment. On Earth, the cities had been rebuilt, bigger and more beautiful than before. The scars of the attack were still visible in some places, craters that had been turned into memorials, ruins that had been preserved as reminders. But humanity had not just recovered. They had transformed themselves into something new. Commander Daniel Ortiz stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Resolute, watching the stars streak past as the ship traveled faster than light. He was 53 years old, with gray hair at his temples and a calm expression that hid the storm of emotions inside him. His grandmother had survived the bombardment as a child, hiding in a bunker beneath the city of Snow Paulo while the world burned above her. She had told him stories about that day, about the fear and the fire and the terrible silence that followed. Now he was about to meet the beings responsible for that nightmare. The Resolute was not a warship. Though it was more powerful than anything the Velthary had brought to Earth 2 centuries ago, its hull was covered with adaptive armor that could change shape and density to deflect incoming attacks. Its engines were so efficient that they violated laws of physics that the Galactic Council considered fundamental. Its weapons were kept powered down as a sign of good faith. But the Council's border stations had scanned the ship and seen enough to understand what humanity had become. "We are approaching the Council's space border," reported Lieutenant Maria Santos, the ship's navigator. She was young, only 25 years old, born in a time when the invasion was ancient history. But she had studied it, learned about it, felt the weight of it the way all humans did. "The Council Defense Fleet is forming up ahead." Daniel looked at the tactical display and counted the ships. 12,000 warships from 23 different species, forming a massive sphere around the Council station. Their weapons were all pointed at the Resolute. The message was clear. One wrong move, and they would be destroyed. "Open a communication channel," Daniel ordered. "Broadcast on all frequencies." The communication officer, a young man named Christopher Torres, activated the ship's broadcasting system. Daniel took a deep breath and spoke. "This is the Earth's vessel Resolute, requesting an audience with the Galactic Council. We come in peace, but we come prepared." The response took several minutes to arrive. When it did, it was not a warm welcome. "Earth vessel, you have violated the quarantine established by the Galactic Council. You are ordered to return to your system immediately or face destruction." Daniel smiled slightly. "We acknowledge your quarantine. We do not recognize its authority. The council that established that quarantine is the same council that authorized the unprovoked attack on our homeworld. We are here to discuss that attack and to offer humanity's application for membership in your organization." The communication channel went silent. Daniel could imagine the chaos his words were causing in the council chamber. For 200 years, they had treated humanity like a problem to be ignored, Now the problem was on their doorstep, asking for a seat at the table. "Sir," said Maria, "I am detecting movement in the defense fleet. Several ships are breaking formation." Daniel watched the tactical display. Some ships were moving closer, their weapons charging. Others were holding position, waiting for orders. The entire fleet was uncertain, caught between the instinct to attack and the fear of what would happen if they did. "Steady," Daniel said. "Hold our position. Do not power up any weapons." The standoff continued for almost an hour. Then, finally, a new message arrived. "Earth Vessel Resolute. You are granted permission to dock at Council Station 7. A representative will be sent to escort your commanding officer to the council chamber. Any hostile action will result in the immediate destruction of your ship. Lieutenant Santos, take us in. Slowly. Let them scan everything they want to scan. We have nothing to hide." The Resolute moved through the defense fleet, 12,000 weapons tracking its every movement. The council station was enormous, a massive structure that served as the meeting place for the representatives of 47 species. It had existed for nearly as long as the council itself, expanded and modified over the UHE millennia to accommodate new members and new technologies. As the ship approached the docking bay, Christopher Torres received another transmission. "Sir, I am getting reports from Earth. Admiral Hart wants you to know that the fleet is in pause." Ishan Daniel nodded.
"The fleet?"
200 warships, hidden at strategic points throughout Council space. They had crossed the quarantine boundary years ago, undetected by Council sensors. They were not there to attack. They were there to ensure that the Council did not make the same mistake that Velthary had made 2 centuries ago. "Tell the Admiral to hold position and maintain radio silence," Daniel ordered. "If everything goes well, they will not be needed." The Resolute docked without incident. Daniel changed into his formal uniform, a simple black outfit with no medals or ribbons. The only decoration was a small pin on his collar, a blue marble representing Earth. He had worn it since the day he graduated from the Naval Academy, a reminder of what he was fighting for. The council chamber was the largest enclosed space Daniel had ever seen. It could hold thousands of representatives from dozens of species, each one seated in areas specially designed for their biology. Some breathed different atmospheres. Some perceived different wavelengths of light. Some did not have physical bodies at all, existing as patterns of energy or living crystals. When Daniel walked in, every eye and sensor and crystalline facet turned to look at him. He was alone. The council had insisted that no other humans be allowed in the chamber. They were afraid, he realized. They had seen what humanity could do, and they were terrified. High Chancellor Yvanol of the Crystalline Hegemony spoke first. Their body was a complex structure of living crystal that chimed like bells when they moved. "You should not be here. Your species was quarantined by unanimous council decree." Daniel stopped in the center of the chamber, surrounded by beings who had decided his species should be exterminated. He felt fear deep in his chest, but he did not let it show. His grandmother had faced worse. His ancestors had faced worse. He could face this. "The quarantine was established after your council authorized an attack on our homeworld," he said. "An attack that killed 4 billion people. An attack that we did not provoke and did not deserve. We are not here to discuss the quarantine. We are here to discuss why." The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted at each other in languages Daniel could not understand. The translation system struggled to keep up. High Chancellor Yvanol activated something that sent a wave of calm through the room, quieting the chaos. "You are accusing the council of wrongdoing," Yvanol said. "That is a serious charge. It is not an accusation. It is a fact. 200 years ago, the Velthary Collective proposed an attack on Earth to harvest our resources. The council voted to approve that attack. 4 billion humans died as a result. We have the records. We have the wreckage. We have the truth." Ambassador Kethvel of the Velthary rose from his seat. He was the descendant of the commander who had led the invasion, and he carried himself with the same arrogance. "Your species possessed resources that were strategically valuable. Your elimination was a matter of efficiency. You were primitives. You should have died quietly like all the others." The words hung in the air. Daniel felt his anger rising, the same anger that every human felt when they thought about the bombardment. But he controlled it. He had not come here for revenge. "Efficiency," he repeated. "You murdered 4 billion people because it was efficient." And the council approved. No one spoke. The representatives of 47 species sat in silence, confronted with the consequences of a decision made 2 centuries ago. Some of them had not even been born when the vote was taken, but they all knew what had been done in their name. Daniel reached into his uniform and pulled out a small device. Throughout the chamber, weapons powered up. Guards moved forward. The tension was so thick it was almost visible. "Relax," Daniel said. "It is not a weapon. It is a data crystal." He placed the crystal on the speaking platform in front of him. "This contains the complete historical record of the bombardment. Every death we could document, every name we could recover, every child who never grew up, every parent who never came home, every love story that ended in fire. 4 billion individual tragedies recorded so that they would never be forgotten." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that had watched his people die and done nothing. "We did not come here to destroy you. We could, if we wanted. Our fleet is currently positioned at 17 strategic points throughout Council space. You did not detect them. You did not know they were there until this moment. We have spent 2 centuries preparing for a war we hoped would never come." The panic that swept through the chamber was almost physical. Representatives scrambled to communicate with their homeworlds. Military commanders demanded verification. The entire council seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Daniel waited for the chaos to subside. Then he spoke the words that would change the galaxy forever. "But we choose peace." The silence that followed Daniel's words was absolute. 47 species, thousands of representatives, millions of support staff and military personnel, all frozen in shock. They had expected threats. They had expected demands for revenge. They had not expected peace. High Chancellor Yevonol was the first to recover. Their crystalline body chimed softly as they leaned forward. "You could destroy us. You have the power to do so, and yet you choose peace. Why?" Daniel took a deep breath. This was the moment he had prepared for his entire life, the moment every human had been waiting 200 years to see. He had to get it right. "Because we remember what it felt like to be helpless," he said. "We remember watching our cities burn while we could do nothing to stop it. We remember the terror of knowing that beings with godlike power had decided we should die. We remember feeling small and weak and alone in a universe that wanted us dead." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We could make you feel that way now. Our ships are more advanced than anything in your fleets. Our weapons could crack your homeworlds like eggs. We could spend the next 1,000 years hunting down every species that voted for our extermination and repaying the favor. Some of our people wanted exactly that. They wanted revenge. They wanted justice. They wanted blood." Ambassador Kethvel of the Velthari stood up, his scales flushing with defensive color. "Then why not take it? Why not finish us, as we tried to finish you?" Daniel turned to face him directly. "Because revenge would not bring back the 4 billion we lost. It would not heal the trauma that haunts every human generation. It would not make our children safer, or our future brighter. All it would do is spread the same suffering we experienced to others. And we are better than that." He looked around the chamber again, this time with something like compassion in his eyes. "We did not come here to punish you. We came here to understand you, to learn why you thought it was acceptable to murder an entire species without even introducing yourselves first. To figure out what kind of galaxy we were born into and how we can make it better." The Luminary observer, Ethos, rose from their seat. Their body glowed with soft blue light, pulsing gently with emotion. "I spoke against the attack 200 years ago. I tried to stop it. I am sorry that I failed." "We know," Daniel said. "We studied your council records. We know who voted for the attack and who opposed it. We know which species wanted to send a second fleet to finish us off, and which ones argued for leaving us alone. We know everything." The chamber stirred nervously. If the humans had access to council records, what else did they know? What secrets had they uncovered during their 2 centuries of preparation? We also know that most of you are not evil, Daniel continued. You made a mistake. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. But you are not monsters. You were just beings who forgot what it means to value life. You became so powerful that you stopped seeing species like ours as real people. We were just numbers to you. Resources to be harvested. Problems to be eliminated. He picked up the data crystal from the platform and held it up so everyone could see. This crystal contains 4 billion names. 4 billion. People who were real. Who had families and dreams and fears. Who wanted to live and love and see their children grow up. Every single one of them deserves to be remembered. And every single one of them was killed because your council decided they did not matter. Daniel placed the crystal back on the platform. Humanity formally requests membership in the Galactic Council. We will follow your laws. We will contribute to your defense. We will share our technology and our knowledge. We will be your partners in building a better galaxy. But in return, we ask for one thing. High Chancellor Yevonil S. Crystals chimed. Name it. Remember what happened to us. Remember what you did to us. Remember that we could have chosen differently, and spend the rest of your existence being grateful that we did not. The vote took 3 hours. It was the most contentious debate in Council history. The Velthari objected, of course, arguing that humanity was too dangerous to be trusted. Several other species agreed, pointing out that the humans had already demonstrated their ability to infiltrate Council space undetected. Letting them join the Council would be like inviting a predator into the herd, but the majority voted in favor. Some did it out of guilt. Some did it out of fear. Some did it because they recognized that humanity had already proven themselves to be more civilized than the species that had attacked them. Whatever their reasons, the result was the same. Humanity was welcomed into the Galactic Council, the youngest member species in its 12,000-year history, far away. On the bridge of the Carrier Remembrance, Admiral Patricia Hart watched the broadcast of the vote. She was 67 years old, as a great-great-granddaughter of General Samuel Hart. Her entire life had been dedicated to this moment. Around her, 200 warships maintained their hidden positions throughout Council space. Their crews were ready for battle. Their weapons were armed and targeted. If the Council had voted no, if they had chosen to attack the Resolute, the human fleet would have struck back with overwhelming force. It would have been a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, but that war would not happen. At least not today. All ships stand down, Patricia ordered. Transmit the peace codes. Begin withdrawal to rally points. Well done, everyone. We did it. The bridge erupted in quiet celebration. Officers hugged each other. Some cried. Some laughed. They had all grown up with stories of the bombardment, with the knowledge that somewhere out there, beings who had murdered billions of their ancestors were waiting to finish the job. Now those beings had accepted humanity as equals. The nightmare was finally over. Patricia walked to her private cabin and closed the door. She needed a moment alone. She needed to process what had just happened. On her desk was a bottle of bourbon, old and dusty. The label read, Virginia Bourbon, Hart Family Distillery, EST 2159. Never forget. Her great-great-grandfather had started that distillery in the year after the bombardment, using grain grown in soil that had been irradiated by alien weapons. The first batch had been terrible, almost undrinkable. But he had kept making it, year after year, as a symbol of humanity's refusal to give up. The distillery still existed, still producing bourbon. Still remembering, Patricia poured herself a glass and held it up to the viewport. Outside, the stars were shining, the same stars that had watched humanity nearly die 2 centuries ago. The same stars that now welcomed them as members of the galactic community. We did it, grandfather, she whispered. We survived. We became strong. We found the beings who hurt us, and we showed them who we really are. Not monsters. Not conquerors. Just humans. She thought about Daniel Ortiz, standing alone in that chamber full of aliens, speaking for all of humanity. She thought about her grandmother's grandmother, Catherine Moore, who had died ramming her ship into an alien dreadnought. She thought about Samuel Hart, who had turned humanity's rage into determination and their despair into strength. "We remember," she said, raising her glass to the stars. "We always remember." She drank the bourbon slowly, savoring the taste of home. Then she put the glass down and returned to the bridge. There was still work to do. Treaties to negotiate, relationships to build, a galaxy to explore. Humanity had spent 200 years preparing for war. Now, they would spend the next 200 years proving that peace was possible. It would not be easy. There would be conflicts and misunderstandings and moments when it seemed like all their work had been for nothing. But they would succeed. Because humans were survivors. They had stared into the face of extinction and refused to die. They had turned their darkest hour into their greatest triumph. They had proven that strength and mercy could exist together. That power did not have to mean cruelty. The Galactic Council had tried to destroy them instead. They had made them stronger. And now, finally, the galaxy would see what humanity could truly become. Not conquerors, not destroyers, but builders, teachers, protectors of the weak, and champions of the forgotten. The humans would remember their own suffering and use it to prevent the suffering of others. They would make sure that no species ever faced what they had faced. They would be the guardians they had wished for when the sky turned white and their world burned, because that was what it meant to be human. To remember, to survive, to choose hope over hatred, to never, ever give up.